Okay, today we have this old Compaq. It doesn't work anymore. It turns on and everything, but the motherboard is fried. I tried putting Windows on it, Ubuntu, every type of software I can think of. It doesn't work at all. It's 32-bit, so it's not that great anyways. And yeah, it always has CPU errors and driver errors. So I'm just gonna take it apart and scrap it for parts. So let's get started. So if we look at the top here, we can tell that it's a Windows XP Professional. This was probably used in a business at some point. It did come with a matching monitor, so I'll make a video on that at some point too. Also, I plan to save this Windows XP key up here. Alright, you can see one of these panels comes off, this one right here. And I already took the screws out of the back because I tried to put a new drive in here and put software on it. But none of that worked because it's such an old machine. Alright, with the cover off, you can tell I've already been in here, as the fan is out of place and the RAM is too. Believe it or not, I didn't do a lot of exploring, so I don't know anything about this machine. I also tested these drives earlier and they do not work, just to be clear. So I'm not going to be salvaging those, but I will salvage parts from the drives. Getting a closer look at the drive, we can see it's a compact disk drive that I assume has a mechanical failure inside. You can also see this floppy drive here. It's a Panasonic and it is a 3¼ inch floppy drive. Looking at the back here, we can tell by the type of motor that it's corkscrew driven, which I know isn't the best term for one of these drivers, but it is a good way to describe it. Looking a little closer, you can see right here is the hard drive bay as labeled. Also here, if we take a look at the front I/O, we can see that it has FireWire, audio out, 2 USB 2.0s, and a microphone in jack. There's also a power switch and some LED indicators. After we have taken the front I/O out, you can see on the back that there are 3 pins, each for a different section of the board. Over here on the left side we have a USB header, in the middle we have an audio header, and finally on the right side we have a FireWire header. Taking a look at the back IU, you can tell that this was fairly upgraded for a business PC. You can tell there's a network card, a video card, and a USB extension card. Someone screwed on a cover over the VGA on the original motherboard, since it does have built-in graphics. There's 2 PS2 ports for a keyboard and a mouse. It also has a FireWire port on the back, as well as 4 USBs, an Ethernet port, a printer port, and a serial port. Looking at the power supply, we can tell that it is a 115 to 220 power supply with a switch up here to switch between the two. It's got a dedicated on-off switch for the power supply itself. After taking the power supply out, we can get a closer look. This label tells us that it's a Dynex model DK400WPS. It's also a fan-controlled ATX 12-volt power supply. And finally, we can see the AC input rating right here. It says 110 volts to 220 volts at 60 to 50 hertz. So it's an overall pretty standard power supply for a computer of this era. There were a lot of Dynex power supplies made at this time. Alright, our next component here is the RAM. So the PC came with some Axiom 256MB RAM, and was upgraded with 2 sticks of Samsung 256MB DDR RAM. And you would think that this machine came with Samsung RAM and the Axiom was the upgrade, as Samsung is arguably better. Both sticks of Axiom RAM have a sticker that says void if removed, implying that it came with the system. Both sticks of Samsung RAM both appear to have an extra spot where another RAM chip could be inserted. And although there is no chip in these spots where a chip could go, there is a singular capacitor right in the middle of both of them. Next up is this video card, which actually has 3 video formats on the back. You can see it has composite, S-video, and VGA out. Looking at the video card, we can tell it is a rather old model, although it does have a dedicated heatsink, although no fan. There are also some spots on here that look like you could solder some VRAM in, but there is no VRAM here. There's also a couple spots over here to solder capacitors in and other components. So in theory, you could add another 2 chips of VRAM to this video card. There's also this big unused space on the PCB here. You can see what I believe to be the serial number right underneath this barcode. Flipping over to the back, we can see there are another 2 sockets on the back of the board where VRAM could have gone. And there are also a couple more what looks to be VRAM on the back. which is directly behind these chips right here. Now, as I'm not a video card expert, please correct me if this isn't VRAM, but I think it is because there's no other chips on the board that look like VRAM. Taking a look at the networking card, you can see that it has its own built-in transformer and little tweeter thing, I forget what you call those, as well as a dedicated built-in clock. This is not Ethernet, this is for a telephone line. You can tell this port is telephone, this port is Ethernet, you can tell by the shape. Looking at the back, there are no other chips or anything soldered on here, so there's nothing much going on in the back. Although this connector right here is double-sided. Taking a look at the last upgraded board inside this machine, which is the USB expansion, you can see it's labeled as a USB 2 host card. This board has the least going on by far, with only a clock and an IC chip with a couple capacitors. The back on this board is almost completely blank other than a few solder points up in the front, and this little sticker with I believe to be the serial number. Moving on to the last component inside of this housing, the motherboard itself. We can see down here we have 2 slots for input media. Here we have a slot for power with the board, and right next to it we have a floppy drive port. And right above we have 2 separate RAM slots right here. Over on the side, we have the expansion ports where the expansion cards were that I took out. We also have what I think is dedicated graphics, as well as the main CPU, which we'll get to in a minute. Here, once again, we have the I/O. And over here, we have some SATA ports and some places where you would connect the front I/O and the power button. So after removing the thermal paste, I couldn't get this off. It's not thermal paste. It's like a thermal pad of some sort. Now, it's a little hard to see, but this is an Intel Pentium 2.6 gigahertz, so it's a really poor chip. Really, it's not that great. This one over here has no label whatsoever, so I don't know what this one is. But we know that this is an Intel Pentium 2.6 gigahertz. Well, guys, that concludes our video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you'd like to see another computer teardown, or potentially building a computer, comment down below.